Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're continuing our reading of Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Pretty interesting guy, pretty well known. He gives us a lot to think about. You can disagree with him, agree with him on other things, but he is quite nerdy to read, so let's continue our reading thereof. Alright. Anew will I teach men to will this way which man has walked blindly, and to affirm it, and no longer to sneak away from it like the sick and decaying. So he contends he's going to teach them to will. That you're not going to sneak away from what you want or walk around blindly, but you're going to walk with a sense of purpose and affirmation. It was the sick and decaying who despised the body and earth and invented the heavenly realm. So here you see kind of his rudeness here, invented the heavenly realm, and the redemptive drops of blood. The redemptive drops of blood is getting at Jesus. But they took even these sweet and gloomy poisons from body and earth. So sweet and gloomy poison. So he calls that redemption of Christ a gloomy poison, morbid and not beneficial, from body and earth. They wanted to escape their own misery, and the stars were too far from them. So here, he's getting at how people, he contends, invented the heavenly realm so that they could use it as a form of escapism from life and from pain, and that stargazing was not enough to make them feel like they had really had a moment of peace. So they have to put their reliance in something they feel will help them. He's quite nihilistic, quite rude, but he's entitled to his opinion. So they sighed, would that there were heavenly ways to sneak into another state of being and happiness. So I don't think prayer is sneaky. It is quite forward, right? Prayer is something that you do openly. You need not sneak, but he's putting it in a negative connotation, as we have seen. Thus they invented their sneaky ruses and bloody potions. Ungrateful, these people deem themselves transported from their bodies and this earth. But to whom did they owe the convulsions and the raptures of their transport? To their bodies in this earth. Zarathustra is gentle with the sick. Verily, he is not angry with their kinds of comfort and ingratitude. Well, that's kind of weird. Why would you not be angry at ingratitude, when ingratitude is something detestable? So, he is posing himself as something gentle with the sick, but then goes around enabling ingratitude and selfishness. May they become convalescents, men of overcoming. So men of overcoming, and create a higher body for themselves. So here, he has this sort of, remember, he wants to teach men to will this way and to affirm it. They don't need to sneak away from the sick and decaying. He says Zarathustra is gentle with the sick, therefore meaning that he goes with them, right? And that he wants to teach men the art of overcoming and to create a higher body for themselves. Now, what you need to understand is he doesn't mean create a physical body, because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create. He means a sort of mental state of body. Nor is Zarathustra angry with the convalescent whose eyes his delusion tenderly, and, at midnight, sneaks around the grave of his God. So here, you notice how he keeps using the word sneak, 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 which has a more rat connotation, a more cowardly connotation to it, which I detest. Now, he says sneak around the grave of his God. This he could also see in a way that we are not going to see, that he sees the holy places, right, the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, as graves of God, rather than places where you can think about him, right? So that's quite negative, and he makes the worshiper sound like somebody who is some rodent. It's kind of really sad. Because rats will sneak around a graveyard. So when he says, worshippers are basically sneaking around graves of their god, that their god isn't living but dead, you see his kind of rudeness coming out. But even so, his tears still betray sickness and sick body to me. So here, he's saying, he can see some of these worshippers crying, weeping, now that it's a form of sickness. Many sick people have always been among the poetizers and god-cravers. Furiously they hate the lover of knowledge and that youngest among the virtues, which is called honesty. No, I would disagree with that. So he's calling the god-cravers and the poets sick people, then that they hate the lover of knowledge. So this shows you the worshipping of the mind here. Thinking that the rational man has all the answers you need and knows what's in the unseen, and that you should turn to them and that they will have the knowledge. Now, he's contending here that the god-cravers have no knowledge and that they've shut up their mind. Quite the opposite. Especially when he says that he will give comfort and he's not angry with the ungrateful. Here clearly he's ungrateful for God. And so you see his kind of attitude here is very negative, hyper negative. And when he says that the god-cravers and the poets hate honesty, he's calling them liars, that they love lies, which I think is horrible. Because poets try to encapsulate honesty in a poetic way. What I mean by that is, they'll encapsulate a beauty they perceive with their eyes and try to fit it into grammar. They try to fit it in to the verbal realm. They try to translate what they feel into word form so that you too can have an emotional connection with it. And the god-cravers, they love honesty because God is truth. God only loves the truth. Shaitan is the father of lies. So to say that the god-cravers hate honesty is just not true. But from his perspective, he has it in his own twisted mind this way. They always look backward toward dark ages. So here again, this is where you get some of the Nietzscheans, how they view religion, is that it is backward, the dark ages, before reason was invented, which is an insult to everybody of the past. The fine architecture, the knowledge they had about plant medicines, about livestock, about the seasons, where to plant, warfare, child rearing, childbirthing, delivery. They had a lot of knowledge as well. I don't see it as, everything in the future is good just because it's in the future. It's quite absurd. We have people eating Tide Pods. There's a lot of strange things you can see in modernity that don't show you progress. And it's a dark age of consciousness and ignorance. So what one perceives to be a dark age, another will think is the type of progress that's championed and should be the light of the world. I would say we're living in a dark ages now of moral decency. Women, showing images of their anus online for money, I think is dark, And women not wanting to have marriage and thinking their kids don't need a father, thinking men don't matter, trying to feminize men, that to me is a dark age. Now, I look back to religion to say, hey, these are our traditional gender roles. I think we should go back to that. I don't think that is a dark age. Because I don't think all women are capable of being leaders, of being around things they shouldn't be. And I don't think every woman is capable of being a mother either, and so let her go to the career she needs, right? There's a balance. But in the end, I don't consider looking back to the lessons of the past as a dark age, because if you study history, you learn from the mistakes of others, and you learn what they did right as well. It's quite dishonest to think that looking towards history, you'll find no truth, which is basically what he's getting at, in my opinion. Let me know what you think. Then indeed delusion and faith were another matter. The rage of reason was godlikeness, and doubt was sin. Now here, he does have one particular point that some see doubting as a form of sin. As long as you let those doubts go unanswered, you are doing a sort of sin against yourself, I'd argue. You should be looking for answers. You should want to see these answers. And there is a rage of reason because you can rationalize yourself into anything. Women, in particular, we can rationalize a lot of things. The tyrannical feminine energy can rationalize burning it all down for the sake of a vendetta, for the sake of vengeance, for the sake of getting even. People can rationalize rage with reason and not necessarily come to the proper conclusion. You know? The people can reason themselves into many, many dark abodes. So pretending that reason can't always lead you astray is delusional, I'd say. You have to have a balance. You have to have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you will make the right choice, and you should try to be rational, but rationality is not going to be a 100% thing that can guard you. Because even if you're rational, you can still arrive at the wrong conclusion. I know these godlike men all too well. They want one to have faith in them, and doubt to be sin. All too well I know what it is in which they have most faith. Verily it is not in afterworlds, and redemptive drops of blood, but in the body. See here? What do you notice here? It is not in the afterworld, so not in paradise, but in the body. The body is quite feeble, quite limited, only temporary in strength. To trust in the unseen and what comes ahead of you in the next dimension is far superior than pretending the body has all the answers. That they too have most faith, and their body is to them their thing in itself. But a sick thing it is to them, and gladly would they shed their skins. Therefore, they listen to the preachers of death. So here, preachers of death, right? Taking a highly negative approach to spiritual people. Yes, you mention death, because death is all around. You cannot avoid it, you cannot run from it, you cannot escape it. To think about it is highly important because you begin to live your life differently. And so, the way in which he frames it as, oh, they're so morbid, they're always talking about death. Why don't they talk just about life? Well, to live your life well, you must prepare for your death. And if you want to have a good life, you often reflect about death. Otherwise, you walk more blindly, I'd say, because you are not living and you're indeed a walking dead. You don't think about anything beyond the immediate now. And if you think about the future, you can't help but think about death. So, he has his opinion. And themselves preach afterworlds. Listen, rather, my brother, to the voice of the healthy body. I mean, the healthy body, so here he's saying that the rational one, the rage of reason is healthy, and that the sneaky sick ones are the poetizers and God cravers. So he's really quite dark in his opinion. I do not agree with it. That is a more honest and purer voice. More honesty and purely speaks the healthy body. That is perfect and perpendicular. So here again the flesh, a form of hedonism. Thinking that because your body is good looking, that you somehow should have a purer voice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed you with beauty, but beauty does not mean you have a more honest and purer voice. There are plenty of evil women who are quite attractive, but horrible, awful wives and mothers, and have nothing to offer except their temporary beauty. So, a plastic surgeon creating a perfect, beautiful body for a time does not make that person more rational or reasonable. But again, Nietzsche likes playing with our thoughts. He likes, getting us to argue with him, which is what we're doing. And it speaks of the meaning of the earth. Thus spoke Zarathustra. What do you think, fam? How do you feel about what he says? That he will teach men to will, to not walk blindly, to affirm their existence, that redemptive drops of blood, the invented heavenly realm, sneaking around the graveyard of God, and that poetizers and God cravers are worse, and that they hate knowledge, and they hate honesty, and that they're backwards because they look toward the past. This is quite negative. You know, he's the one who comes off as ungrateful to me, you know. Now, he has taken some pickings at the Christians, but still, as a Muslim, I don't like the way he talks about the preachers of death. Because to me, the real preachers of death are occultists. The ones who fetishize death and seek death as payments. That is quite different than the person who says, live your life, do good deeds, because in your death you'll be held accountable for all your ingratitude. To me, that is rational, that is knowledge, that is good. That is a true overcoming. For him, overcoming comes from just the mind. For me, I'd say overcoming comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where I would become steadfast and not fear death. Yet, I still want to hear our imams give khutbahs about death, because only through death can I really prepare, right? Can I really recognize that anyone can go at any time? To not think that just because you have a perfect and perpendicular body that is healthy, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't snatch you up at any time. So again, you have to be careful, you know, whose ego you take from. And indeed, Nietzsche has quite a large ego through his writing. He did get syphilis from a prostitute and go insane, so keep that in mind. So he couldn't control his desires, and he got a sexually transmitted disease that eroded his skull and made him clinically insane. So there's that. Anyways, fam, hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think.